All right. Welcome to the Partnership Mastermind podcast, where we unpack what actually works in B2B partnerships. I'm your host, Chris Lavoie. Today's guest is someone I've learned a ton from just by reading his LinkedIn posts. We have Rob Moyer here, head of GTM partnerships at Gong. Rob's not your typical partnerships leader. He scaled ecosystem revenue from 100 million to over $1 billion at Synex, built GTM channels at Microsoft, and now leads the modern co-sell motion at Gong, arguably one of the best run GTM orgs in SaaS. What I really like about Rob is how he thinks and operates, and particularly building partnerships like product teams do, intentionally, systematically, and with real outcomes. Today, we're going to dive into what's broken about old school partner thinking, what modern ICs need to thrive, and how AI is changing the game. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Amazing. Well, look, each episode, we're going to give the same 5 quick-hitting questions to our guests. Not so much about the content, but just to let us ease into the conversation and get our audience a little bit more familiar with you. You ready for that?
Absolutely.
5 quick hitters.
All right.
First up, what was your first ever job, and what's one lesson from it that's stuck with you to this day?
You know what's funny? I was a busboy at a high-end Japanese restaurant, and this was way back in the day. And the amount of money I made was like eye-opening. But it really taught me, I want to be in front of people. If you treat people well, you get paid well. And even though I was a busboy, I was 18 going, wow, I'm making more money than I ever thought I could. And it was because of my interactions with actual people.
Yeah, interesting you say that. I've learned a lot about that as well. And as a former scientist, the impact of my role, it was the benefactors of my work were so far away from me, right? I was trying to reimagine how pharmaceutical drugs were invented, but the people who would actually benefit from that, I had no interactions with. So I feel similarly that once I got into more business development oriented roles where people are interacting with you and benefiting from your labor, so to speak, it's more lucrative and more fun. So I love that. Sweet. Next up, what's a just for fun hobby that no one would guess that you're into?
I got to say, I have adult children. During COVID, I started succulents in California per weather. I usually kill plants, but I have an amazing succulent garden, and it really driven because it was COVID. I was bored and I had to do something, so I really gotten into them. So
amazing. This is great. We're 2 questions in. We've already learned that the legend Rob himself was a bus boy. That guy, that's how he got his start, and he's into succulents. Love it. We're just getting started. Cool. Next up, give us a spicy one here. What's one hot take about partnerships that would most likely start an argument on LinkedIn?
Ooh, I could probably go a little bit, but I think it's it's really having this lateral thinking mindset that question everything, question all the things that you hear about how you should run partnerships. It really is about being intelligent, driving a system of action, and building out your network that way. When you just go in and do what everybody else is doing, you're going to get whatever results that your company's doing. It's that lateral thinking, that ability to question everything, to do something slightly different is where you get bigger results. Because my big motto in my whole career is, if I can outperform the market and if I can outperform my company, my direct counterparts, I'm going to have a great business. And so you have to think different to get there.
Yeah, love that. We talked about that a bit in our check-in call last week. And I think, people who are change agents, who, don't go with the status quo, go the furthest in their career, live the most enriched lives. But fortunately, 80+%, probably 90+% of employees at companies are just living by the status quo, just hoping to survive, right? But it's that unique 10% who have that growth mindset and are willing to go left when every other signal says go right. So I love that one. Sweet. Second last one here, and then we'll get into it, is if you had to nickname your personal operating style, like a code name for how you work, what would it be?
Ooh, that is probably the toughest one. I have to think about that. So my personal operating style.
What nickname?
I kind of this, I'm a Californian, I'm very chill, but I'm ultra direct. So I would say my operating system would be, I'm going to need another pass on this. Ask the question again.
Cool. California candid, maybe. Cool. Love it. Okay, last one. Who is the one person in the partner world right now that you think more people should be learning from right now? And I'm sure a lot of people are saying you, but I'd love to hear who you think.
Here's a lesson. One of my favorite people is Greg Portnoy. And the reason is he had a different take. And, this is more a lesson for people that are later stage career. One of my special skills is learn from people younger than you. And I look for people that I look for the thought process more than anything. And he has a great way of thinking about it. And I think there's a parallel to some of the conversations you and I've had, but feels like the direct sales motion's got this big upgrade over the last 5 years with AI, the tools and the methodologies. And I think partnerships is due for that. And he was like the first person kind of saying it out loud, what I was thinking. And so I give a ton of respect to him. And it's also, it gets to my notion of like, you can learn from anybody in this. It doesn't have to be somebody above you in their career. It could just be somebody that is saying the stuff out loud.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, certainly co-sign on Greg. He's been a personal mentor for me in the entrepreneurial sense, and I think he's one of the few who isn't bringing a lot of fluff, right, to the LinkedIn content wave. So he's certainly someone I co-sign on. And just for the audience, something that Rob said there was really important, which is, learning from people younger than you. I think probably counterintuitive for most, including myself, where it's you always want to learn from people who are +1 or +2 levels above you that you're trying to get to, but don't forget about people who are coming up behind you, right? Maybe they're approaching things differently and you can learn a lot from that. And it helps keep you fresh in what's happening. Sweet.
In fact, I feel like I have that here at Gong. I came in, and my team was just much more adept at modern tools than I. And, I would celebrate the little wins, but, it's been a great partnership because I'm able to help shape them on the way you think, how you build a business. And they're keeping me sharp on like how fast you can get things done with tools. So it's a takeaway that I continue to focus on. And, it's turned into great results.
Love that. And then final note there, it's a great way to ingratiate yourself with your direct reports as an example. When you're saying, hey, look, I'm not just here to teach you. There's a lot you can teach me as well. So I'm sure that helps build relationships. Sweet.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, look, fun icebreakers. Now time to get into the nitty gritty. So I'd love to just start with talking about some of the content you've been posting, which has been fantastic. Highly encourage the audience to follow Rob's content. Specifically focusing first on ideal partner profile or IPP, and how that translates to value creation. So the first question for you is, you've written a lot about the old ideal partner profile mindset being outdated. So in your view, what's broken about that approach and how are you thinking differently at Gong?
Yeah, so I think this is one of those ones that I've kind of also evolved my thinking as a result of being here. But, I got a lot of DMs on that one. So I still think IPP is important, but it's a starting point, not an end point. So when everybody tries to figure out like how we going to build a business, the first thing, it's the lowest hanging fruit is what's our ideal partner profile? But the real magic is, what are the buyer personas? Because you can match the profiles, but are you talking to the same people that will actually move the needle? I love using tools like Crossbeam, and back in the day there was Partner Tap, etc. And they did that first thing of matching accounts. And a lot of people said, well, let's use the IPP. But the real magic is within that customer, who's the buying persona. So for me, it's really taking everything a step further, because that's where your efficiencies, your win rates go up when you can really dig into, it's not just the account, the end user. It's like, who are you talking to at that end user? Especially for a company like Gong, we're a little bit more front office than traditional IT vendors. So we have a different buying persona. We tend to be CRO, CIO, the front office, where you can do an account matching and you can get some false negatives because you go, hey, I want to go to this account, but this partner does not sell to that persona. They're talking to somebody in IT, and that really does me no good.
Yeah, I love that. And two things there to double down on for the audience. One, a lot of partner programs, according to Rob, and I certainly co-sign this, have bloated definitions of IPP. And Rob's not saying do away with IPP, but you need to be more precise in the definition. So I think lazy, bloated definitions hurt a lot of partner programs, especially at the IC level, because they're using it as like the source of truth that they must follow. And then on the persona side, that's something I teach a lot about in our programs, where it's like, look, if a seemingly a good partner prospect, you go to their website, they have similar logos, it might indicate that you're playing in the same sandbox and your IPP overlap is strong, but that is just one very broad indicator, right? What about persona overlap? So who are the actual buyers and users of your tools, right? Those are both really important. But then also, to add on to what you said there, Rob, which I loved, is at what point in your ideal customer's life cycle do they typically buy your solution, right? You could use employee count, you could use revenue count, you could use number of offices, number of employees, etc. And that's different for every company. So the sweet spot is ICP overlap coupled with persona overlap, coupled with life cycle similarity overlap. If I can parse what you were saying there, Rob, but yeah, I totally agree on how important it is to get that right.
Well, and I add to kind of something you asked me earlier. Like when you build your team, and I love what you're doing with training partner managers, because you also have to teach them how to think about this. Because if we just follow a playbook, people stop. And one of my experiences over the last 10 years is having people that said, "Oh, your management style is a little different because I'm used to people telling me what to do, and here's the playbook." Versus you're going, "Here's the playbook, but here's the thought process. Go figure this out." And that's where growth comes from the managers. And I think your mastermind classes are a perfect example. It's like everybody has a playbook, but it's how do you execute against that playbook, and how do you get them to think? Because this isn't brain surgery. This is partnerships and ability to drive a great revenue as a result of thinking.
Exactly. I think we think similar, and it's how do you execute against that strategy when the variables change inevitably, which they do, right? So everyone can run a playbook if they're given it to it, but what about in 6, 12, 18 months when the market changes, your company's product, ICP changes? That's when you see who the strongest practitioners are.
Absolutely.
Sweet. All right, next question. I love the way you phrase like co-designing partner outcomes. I think that's a clever way of talking about a reciprocal approach where you get in the trenches with partners and really build a path to mutually desired outcomes together. That's the right way to do it. So I'm curious, how do you actually co-design partner outcomes today, especially with so many partner types and GTM motions involved at, say, Gong?
It's a great question. I always start with the number one rule in the channel, and it's like follow the money. And it's so simple, but people aren't in this business to be nonprofits. So the first thing is, how are you both going to make money? What is your currencies? I have this conversation with every partner the first time. We talk in terms of current. What's your currency? Here's our currency. They're not going to be perfect, but that's the starting point. But getting to your point is like, it's really deconstructing what has to happen. I call it value creation, because ultimately we want to understand whether it's pre-sales, post-sales, or retention. Where is that value? How do we go after it together? And to me, it's really about having that discipline to have the structured process that you keep moving forward. One of the things that we do is we like to have collaboration docs, and my little tester on these collaboration docs is, are they equally being worked on? Because it's like the other little tip of the trade is the partner emotionally invested in this business, not just saying the right things, but they're doing the right things. So when you put it together, it really creates this kind of system, if you will, that really helps you do two things. You either drive better outcomes, or when to exit, because there's some bad signals from both sides.
That was super valuable. And two things there to double down on. One, I love the way you use the phrase currencies. I talk a lot about this in my direct reports, people I mentor, which is to say that you really need to understand how the partner company transacts and what their billing model is, right? We all want revenue, right? But the billing mechanism could be totally different. You could be a cloud-based company and it's all about API consumption. That's the way you bill customers. It could be seat-based usage. It could be outcome-based usage, especially relevant now in the AI world. So how does your partner actually charge its customers, and how is that different or similar to how you charge? I think it's really important to line that up. But then one thing you said there, Rob, which is really important, and it's one of the reasons I think ICs struggle so much in these roles, is they don't really have that deep understanding like an executive leader like you do. How does Gong actually charge, and how do they really make money? If they don't have that firm understanding, they don't know how to negotiate. They don't know how to build these mutual action plans properly with their partners. So that's the final question here for you is do you see that with early stage ICs in these channel and partnerships roles where they don't have that, senior level understanding of the mechanics of how revenue actually works and how billing actually works. So it kind of holds them back a bit and how they actually execute against partner strategy.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I generally think what you're saying and what I see is it's like they're so wanting a win early. There's a difference in wins. Is it a quality win or is it a one-off win? And I think, everybody has that issue. Everybody in a new role, they want to prove themselves early, but it really comes down to, is this repeatable and scalable? So like even when we started here, when we had nothing, we were kind of creating flywheels. And I remember back in the day, we created like 7 flywheels. Then we ended up consolidating into the 3 that were working. And then we just kept building. And then went back to those other flywheels because it comes down to, you want repeatable the best partnership motions are like an annuity. An annuity. And that's how that's part of my pitch when I tell people about why you should consider partnerships. I was an enterprise sales AE back in the day selling direct. And my lesson is I learned, partnerships is an annuity if you do it right. So kind of long-winded, but that's the way I think about it.
Totally fair game. All right, switching into the next segment here, talking about systems and treating partnerships like a product. I think you've been pretty vocal about that, which I resonate with a lot. So when you say partnerships should be treated more like product launches, what does that mean at the tactical level for an IC, for instance?
Think about customer experience first. I know that is sometimes overly used, but it is, the reason most companies do well is they have great products. Well, it's no different in partnerships. When you talk about outcomes, when you build that plan, you have to think is like, sometimes you'll have these partnerships that look good on paper, but really you're trying to manufacture value. Real value is when you provide great customer experience, solve a problem, and get things where a customer go, wow, that would not have happened without these two coming together. And when you build that mindset, I think it's easier to execute. And there's 2 sides to this. I think I said this earlier on, the power of no. Part of the power of no in your career is like not going down a path because you're trying to make an unnatural fit, if that makes sense. Like, if it doesn't create value to the customer and it just looks good on paper, it might not be a partnership, and that's okay. No isn't a good outcome because ultimately we're measured on where we spend our time and creating value.
Definitely co-sign with all of that. And I cut my teeth in tech partnerships and integration strategy. So that one definitely hits home with me. And the biggest mistakes I was making early on as a tech partner manager tasked with building up a marketplace and driving revenue through those was we weren't involving the customer and our customer success team nearly enough. And we were doing a lot of just brainstorming of, hey, based on our product, based on, other ISV vendors in our ecosystem, what use cases and particular integrations could we come up with, right? And that's a totally flawed way of doing it versus why don't we get into tools like Gong, which was super valuable, listen to insights, pick up on them, talk to customers, talk to our customer success team, talk to our sales team, right? Are we getting held back on deals because we're missing specific functionality or features that could be filled vis-a-vis a specific integration? So yeah, just to reiterate what Rob's saying here, start with the customer, start with the product. That's where the magic is. It shouldn't just be partner manager A on one side and partner manager B on the other side. Having lunch brainstorming of some theoretical integration as an example, right? It really should start and finish with the customer.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, speaking of that, I was playing around with your new Partnerships Revenue Lab GPT. So I'm surprised not as many people have started using and deploying custom GPTs, but I wasn't surprised to see you've created one. You have over 800 partner pros using it. I was using it this morning. Would love to know, what was the goal behind it, and how do you see AI enhancing, not replacing, partner execution?
I've always been, I think, one of my key, if I had one superpower, it's not being smart, it's being curious. And, I was at an offsite and then I was talking to some AEs and how they use AI. And I'm like, wow, why shouldn't I do this? And so I literally just spent time, instead of doom scrolling on the internet, I spent time just really learning it. And I have to give a shout out to Francis from Mad Kudu. About a year ago, he just told me how he used open AI and chat GPT specifically. And it really got me thinking like, wow, there's so much that you could do here. So I was just curious and I went and looked at how you build a GPT, and then I started training it. And some of the stuff we've talked about, I've trained it basically on having a bias for action. I use lateral thinking as a great book I read way early in my career, and I just said, what do people actually want? And I get and really it was a give back. I'm at the end of towards the end of my career, and I was like, there's a lot of people out there that need help. And, it's like yourself and others. I just see what you're doing in the community. I go, well, maybe I'll just build this. And, it was actually this little tool. And then I kept giving it to friends in the industry, and they go, wow, you should just publish it. And like I said, it's a free tool. It's not there to replace anything. If anything, it's there to save time and get people to think slightly differently. If you notice, I even built in a little bonus section, so it'll always give you other ideas, because not everybody understands how to do prompts yet, and I think we're in the early days of how you use the prompts to get outcomes.
Love that. I tested it this morning. I was just pretending to be a partner manager at Gong, partnering with HubSpot. And it walked me through a really cool COSO motion. So definitely recommend everyone to check this out. The link for that will be shared wherever you're viewing this podcast. And if I may, Rob, just to follow up on the AI, I really appreciated a vulnerable post you made recently about the fact that you have dyslexia and how AI has helped you express your thinking more clearly. Can you talk about how that has shifted how you work or lead?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny because my team busted me first. They're like, I've never seen you write this long of an email. But everybody, we have like a running joke here. Like, get a Slack and it's Rob hieroglyphics, because, when you have a dyslexia, it's like your mind's moving so fast, and it's like, I just don't see the misspellings. And I don't see that. And this has been the biggest blessing. Like, I started going, wow, I really have something to say. So I started like using AI to help me communicate better. We have this feature in Gong that you can recap, and AI was sending it. And, the first couple times I sent those emails, I go, by the way, this is Rob. I know I don't write this well. And I'd send the AI message. But what it really did is got me thinking like, wow, I should just, I have things to say, and this just enabled me to say it. And I think that's the thing, I saw a lot of shaming online. That's why I posted, because I know a lot of people, the two comments I got most on that post were people that English was their second language, or people with dyslexia. Because at the end of the day, it's about empowering. If you truly use AI is not doing the work. It's just organizing your thoughts and helping you communicate better. Every post, it's probably taken as much time to create posts than it would be if I wrote it out, but it's saying it in a clear way that makes sense. I would challenge, if anybody wanted to look at my old posts, there's always misspellings. In fact, that was one of the running jokes in my last company, a couple companies ago, where they go, that was Rob wrote that one, because there's like a couple.
It's like it's like your subtle
Yeah.
signature.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I love it, and I think I think everybody should look at this as a leveling of the field a little bit, to help those that it's not a big disability, but it is a disability, and it just felt like I had to say something.
the whole community definitely appreciates you for that, Rob. And I see it similarly in that for me at least, it's been almost like a corrective lens for my mind. I'm, pretty hyperactive. Sometimes I can ramble and I don't communicate as effectively as I can. And I've always, as a manager, asked my team to give me feedback consistently in like quarterly review cycles. And the grade I always get the lowest is clarity of my communication, right? And so I found that for AI, it's helped clean that up a lot. And then as a parallel for your GPT, I've created a lot of GPTs myself, and it's almost like you get to extract your brain, right, and transplant it into this thing that can be accessible to others in the masses, right? Because Rob Moyer is not available for everyone on one-on-one calls, right? But through this GPT, you're almost giving your mind away for free in this case. So yeah, I definitely relate a lot to what you had said there.
Well, I want to give a little secret and how I wrote it too. What I learned on early, the higher you go up, I was very guilty of this, as I had some really large organizations in my career, is clarity and getting to the point is what executives thrive. And a lot of times I used to coach my teams like, I love all the detail, but not everybody thinks that way. Get to the point quickly and get to the outcome. So I tried to put a little bit of that. It won't give you too robust of an answer because I think ultimately it's about how you want to get to the point and really focus on the outcome. So there's a little lens of that. I hope it comes through, but it's really based on that thinking.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool to think that in the future, AI will be so present, but with custom GPTs, people's personalities will still show up, right? Fingers crossed that that's the case. So I love how you're kind of preempting your GPT in that way. Cool. Last section here, just two final questions. First, and this one is all about hiring and skills in the AI era, something that you're clearly passionate about and certainly is a huge focus here at Partnership Mastermind. So the first question is, you've led large teams. What are you looking for now in partner IC hires that maybe you weren't screening for a few years ago?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing. I kind of look. Obviously, we're always looking for intelligent people. I'm always looking for grit, but I kind of used it earlier in one of my things. People that are curious, because the ability to adapt to change has never been more important as is now. And, we all get in these ruts of thinking. And, when you're interviewing for people, it's like, I look for two things. Are they speaking about themselves or are they speaking about the market? I prefer people that talk about the market. And then I try to ask questions around how they're curious, because ultimately, I have this thesis that AI is really going to create some gaps between people that understand and embrace it versus people that don't. And that gap is going to be people that are at the top are going to be way more productive. And it's not an arrogance thing. It's more of a curiosity thing. Are you able to look how fast these models have changed in just 3 months? It's like in 3 months, you better have a little bit different thinking on AI than you did 3 months ago. And so how do you unlock that in an interview? But that is what I look for.
Yeah, well said. I've heard this new era compared to like the steroid era for professional sports, if anyone's familiar with that, like the Lance Armstrong era, where basically in this case, if you're not doping, so to speak, and it's a crude analogy, I apologize for the viewers, but if you're not juicing, so to speak, if you're not using AI, well then it's going to be really difficult to compete. So let me ask you a point blank question, Rob. You're interviewing someone, let's just say for a senior IC position, an important role, and it's just clear that they're really not leaning into AI at all, right? Is that a hard red flag disqualifier, or how do you view that?
These days, I think it is a hard red flag. I mean, I think, back even 2-3 years ago, part of the interview process was how did they prepare for this interview? Because you're not really looking, it's hard to get everything in 4 or 5 30-minute hour conversations. So, a big focus was, did they prepare? How did they prepare? There's no excuse at this point. You should be able to, within a half hour, be completely prepared for an interview. And it's pretty clear when people aren't. But I do think you get to those subtleties, like what direction are they taking? Are they talking about themselves? Are they talking about the market? And, ultimately people are hiring for impact. So, you should be able to use AI to help you with that narrative, but I think it's an important piece.
Yeah, well said. I think Jason Lemkin, SaaStr founder, huge investor. He always says, with the interviews, if you don't show up, it's amazing how many people don't show up prepared, and how quickly you follow up afterwards says a lot about you as well. And I think in this era, you said there's no excuse not to be well prepared. I think that's why the actual live interview is going to be more important than ever, because everyone's resumes are going to look super polished and buffed up, right? And their email writing is going to look super strong. So when they cold DM you to get an interview, it's going to look good. I think the interviews are going to become so important because you can't hide, right? AI is not talking for you in a live call. So I'm really curious to see how pivotal the live interviews become, because I think they're going to be even more paramount.
Oh, I agree. In fact, I can't remember if it was us, somebody I was talking to recently. They asked me, what are some of my techniques? And I used the tennis analogy of like going right to left, because I don't go sequential in my questions because I just want to understand how they think. So I'll go out of left field. I'll be going down this path of, your partnership experience, and then I'll just go, boom. What are the apps on the first page of your phone, and why did you put them there? To see how they think. And there's usually something revealing about what they say.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, no, I love asking contrarian questions as well in these interviews. Cool, Rob. We're just about at time. Last question for you. How should a partner manager today approach leveling up? What would you say to someone trying to move from managing partners to owning revenue, to take a page out of your book?
Yeah, I'd say I always tell people you can execute from where you are to where you want to go. So if I'm a partner manager now and I want to get somewhere else, you build a system. One thing you'll start hearing me say a lot, it's like, we got to create a partner operating model that is very similar to the go-to-market operating model. And for partner managers now, it's like you're very much focused on results, but how you've got the results, and are they repeatable and measurable? And if you can do that from where you are, you're going to set yourself up for the next job, because ultimately, people want to hire people that have the ability to scale things. And when you can talk and live through the processes you built, that's something people look for. It's not about just like how good of an interview you are, or like even your results. You have to be able to tell them how you got the results and how you can repeat them on a scale. So
great advice to take us home. I think the key is, it's one thing to manage something like a coordinator or a manager type role where you're just maintaining the status quo. There's plenty of value and place for that in the world, but there's a difference between that and someone who has a growth mindset, who's responsible for ultimately developing and taking things from 0 to 1, right? In Peter Thiel's famous book, 0 to 1, he has this famous XY curve where on the y-axis, it's 0 to 1, which is innovation. And then on the x-axis, it's distribution, which he calls globalization. There are some people who are focused on globalization, taking what already works and just replicating it at scale. And then there's the inventors, right? Doing it from 0 to 1. I think what Rob is mentioning here is that the people who can go from 0 to 1 are going to get the furthest in their careers.
And my one last tip, I have hindsight in a career, take some chances. I took a channel marketing role for a year because I didn't have that. And I had aspirations of doing something different. That served me well because I wasn't a classic trained marketer, but I did really well because I was an outcome driven seller. So I think having kind of a diverse background as you go up, it'll make it easier, because a lot of people will get so focused on one thing. It's kind of like upselling in revenue. If you want to upsell your career, you have to have kind of a breadth of experience to get you there. So, but once again, you can do it from where you are.
Yeah, important call it to zoom out, and everyone wants to rush to get to their dream job, so to speak, but it definitely takes time, and there's a huge value enriching your background. So final thing, Rob, we just finished a 35-minute interview. If you were to post on LinkedIn about what this show and episode was about, what would you say?
It's a little bit about Operationalizing the new modern channel. I think that we think very similar. I love your takes. You have a slightly different way of processing as I do, and that's what makes this partnership community so great. So I'd say a new way of thinking for modern partnerships.
Amazing. That might be the headline for this podcast moving forward. Well, look, thank you, Rob, so much for joining us, and excited to get this out in the airwaves.
Okay. Thank you for having me.